Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really striking section from the sources, specifically Daniel chapter 5.
hmm
It's quite the story. You've got a king, this huge party, some mysterious writing appearing out of nowhere, and then things take a very sharp turn.
Exactly. And as we look closely just at this text, you'll see it's packed with insights,
Mm.
themes like, power, pride, those warning signs people sometimes miss, and maybe most importantly, consequences.
Right. So let's stick to what the source says and unpack it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so it kicks off by setting a scene of, well, incredible luxury. King Belshazzar throws this massive banquet.
Yeah, not just a small dinner party, 1,000 nobles.
1,000, imagine that. The sheer scale of it. They're all there drinking wine deep into the celebration.
It paints a picture of absolute confidence, doesn't it? Maybe even overconfidence. A king surrounded by his power structure, feasting. You get a sense of invincibility.
You really do. But that
Yeah.
feeling, it doesn't last. While the wine is flowing, the king gets this impulse. He orders something specific brought out.
Yes, the goblets.
The gold and silver goblets. And the text is very clear. These are the ones his predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar, took from the temple in Jerusalem.
And that detail is just so critical, isn't it? These weren't just valuable cups. They were sacred items used specifically for worship.
Exactly. Bringing them into this setting, it feels intentional.
hmm And it wasn't just him using them privately. The text says the king, his nobles, his wives, and his concubines all drank wine from these sacred vessels.
It feels like a power move, a deliberate kind of flaunting, not just over the people they conquered, but over what those people held sacred.
And what they did while drinking from them is maybe the most pointed detail. The text says, as they drank, they praised their own gods, gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, stone,
Wow, so using vessels dedicated to the god of the temple.
to coast idols.
Yeah, idols made of the very materials the cups were made from, or, lesser materials. It's like a direct challenge.
It really is. Using items meant for worshiping the living God, as Daniel later points out, to praise gods that cannot see or hear or understand. It's incredibly provocative, done right out in the open.
So right at this peak moment, the drinking, the idol praise, using these special goblets, something completely unexpected happens.
The mood shifts instantly.
The text says, suddenly the fingers of a human hand appear. Just fingers.
Yeah, no arm, no body, just fingers.
And they start writing on the wall plaster.
Near the lampstand, it specifies, so it's visible, illuminated.
Right there in the light, not hidden. You can almost hear the music stopping, right?
Yeah.
Chatter dying down.
Absolutely. And all eyes are on this hand. The king himself, the text says, watched the hand as it wrote.
His reaction, not curiosity, not confusion initially, but pure terror.
It's visceral. The description is intense. His face turns pale.
Pale is an understatement, isn't it? It says his knees started knocking together.
And his legs gave way. He literally couldn't stand up.
This is the powerful king, completely undone by some writing on a wall. It's not just being startled, it's deep, paralyzing fear.
It really reveals something, doesn't it? Whatever bravado he had moments before just evaporates. He's facing something totally outside his control, and it just breaks him.
So, terrified and faced with this mystery, he needs answers. Fast.
Right. He calls for his experts.
Mm-hmm.
The usual team, enchanters, astrologers, diviners, the wise men of Babylon.
The guys who are supposed to understand omens and secrets.
Exactly. And he makes them a pretty incredible offer to get them motivated.
He really does. The reward is spelled out. Whoever reads the writing and explains it gets clothed in purple.
Royal color. Big deal.
Gets a gold chain for their neck.
Another sign of huge honor.
And gets promoted. Made the third highest ruler in the entire kingdom.
I mean, that's instant massive power, just below the king. It shows how absolutely desperate he is to understand what's happening and maybe stop being so terrified.
So the pressure is on. His best and brightest are brought in. They look at the writing on the wall.
Nothing. The text is blunt. They couldn't read it. They couldn't interpret it.
All that collective wisdom, all the Babylonian expertise, useless.
Completely useless against these few words.
In this failure, it just makes things worse for the king.
Oh, yeah. The text says he became even more terrified. His face grew paler, if that was even possible.
And his nobles, they're just baffled, looking at their collapsing king. The weird writing, the useless experts, the whole situation is just falling apart very publicly.
It really highlights the limits of human wisdom, doesn't it? Especially when confronted with something, well, divine, as we'll see. Their usual methods just didn't apply here.
So Total chaos. Terrified king, confused nobles, stumped wise men. The party's definitely over. And then someone else arrives.
The queen. She hears all the commotion, the shouting maybe, and comes into the banquet hall. The text suggests she wasn't part of the earlier scene.
Right, and she seems much calmer. She basically tells the king, don't panic, don't look so pale, I know someone.
Exactly. She recommends Daniel. Yeah. And her description of him is fascinating. She references his reputation going back to Nebuchadnezzar's time.
What does she say about him? What makes him different from the guys who just failed?
She uses really elevated language. She says he has the spirit of the holy gods in him.
Wow.
And that back in Nebuchadnezzar's day, he was found to have insight, intelligence, wisdom.
Like that of the gods.
Like that of the gods. That's not faint praise. It suggests his abilities come from somewhere else entirely.
Totally. And
Yeah.
she adds a practical point. Nebuchadnezzar actually appointed him chief over the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, diviners, the very groups who just failed.
So he wasn't just one of them. He was their boss, recognized as exceptional even then.
Mm-hmm. She lists his skills. Keen mind, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, explaining riddles, solving difficult problems. She's basically saying, this is the guy you need. Call Daniel, he'll know.
It's interesting, though, if he had such a reputation, why wasn't he called first? That's a great question the text doesn't explicitly answer. Maybe he was associated with the old regime. Or perhaps his kind of wisdom wasn't valued by Belshazzar until things got really desperate. We don't know for sure.
Fair enough. Anyway, the queen's advice works. Daniel is brought in.
You can imagine the scene. This figure, known for this divine connection, walking into this hall filled with fear.
The king speaks to him directly, first confirming who he is. Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king brought from Judah?
He immediately points out Daniel's background in exile, a foreigner, part of a conquered people.
Then he repeats what he's heard, echoing the queen. The spirit of the gods is in you. Insight, intelligence, outstanding wisdom. He mentions his own wise men failed.
And then he lays the offer on the table again. The same massive reward, purple robe, gold chain, third ruler in the kingdom. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, the deal is clear.
So how does Daniel respond to this potentially life-changing offer?
Not how you might expect. He starts by basically saying, keep your gifts. Yeah. You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. He makes it clear he's not motivated by the promotion or the bling.
But he will do the job.
Oh, yes. He immediately follows up. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. His purpose is delivering the message, not getting paid for it.
Okay, so before he reads the words, Daniel sets the stage. He brings up history.
Crucially, yes. He reminds Belshazzar about Nebuchadnezzar, the very predecessor the king mentioned. This history lesson is key to the interpretation.
He talks about Nebuchadnezzar's immense power, the glory given by the Most High God, how nations feared him. He had absolute power.
But then Daniel pivots. He talks about Nebuchadnezzar's fall from that peak. Why? Because his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride.
Pride, that's the key, even for the most powerful king.
And Daniel doesn't mince words describing the consequences, drawing on details from elsewhere in the sources. Driven from society, mind like an animal, living with wild donkeys, eating grass, soaked with dew. Total humiliation.
A really vivid picture of a complete downfall.
A stark reminder of how quickly things can change when you forget the source of your power. And Daniel stresses why it happened and when it ended. It lasted until Nebuchadnezzar finally acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men. The humiliation was linked to learning that specific lesson about ultimate authority.
So Daniel lays out this whole case study about pride, power, and God's sovereignty using Belshazzar's own ancestor, and then he brings it right back to Belshazzar himself.
And this is where it gets personal. He says, essentially, but you, his successor, you knew all this history. You knew what happened to Nebuchadnezzar.
Though you knew all this, that makes it worse, doesn't it? It wasn't ignorance.
Exactly. He had the example, the warning, right there. But he didn't learn. He didn't humble himself.
Instead, Daniel says he did the opposite. He set himself against the Lord of heaven. By doing what?
By doing exactly what they just did, bringing out the temple goblets, drinking from them, and praising idols of metal and wood and stone.
And Daniel spells out the core charge. Belshazzar praised these lifeless idols, but failed to honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways.
That's the heart of it. It wasn't just about the cups. It was about fundamentally disrespecting and ignoring the God who gave him his very breath, his position, everything.
And that failure, the act of defiance and neglect, Daniel says, is why the hand appeared.
Therefore, Daniel says, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. It wasn't random. It was a direct response, a message from the God he dishonored.
Okay, so the message itself, the actual writing, what did it say?
Daniel reads the words, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parson.
Mene, Tuckle, person. 4 words. His entire fate hangs on them.
In Daniel, empowered by that spirit of the holy gods, gives the interpretation, word by word.
What's the breakdown?
Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end.
Numbered, counted, finished, time's up for his kingdom.
Pretty straightforward. Then Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting.
Weighed and found wanting. That's a powerful image, isn't it? Like being measured against a standard and failing.
Exactly. Weighed against God's standard, perhaps against the humility Nebuchadnezzar eventually found. And Belshazzar comes up short. Deficient. Lacking.
It implies a judgment of his character, his actions, his whole approach.
It really does. And finally, Perez, which is the singular form of parson.
Okay.
That means your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians.
Ah, so not just you failed, but here's exactly what happens next. Your empire is gone, handed over to your rivals, the Medes and Persians.
It's a complete and devastating verdict, isn't it? Time's up, you failed the test, and your kingdom is forfeited. And Daniel explicitly ties it all back to that failure to humble himself and honor God.
Now, you'd think hearing that news might change the king's priorities, but what does the text say happens immediately after Daniel interprets the writing?
It's kind of surprising, actually. At Belshazzar's command, they follow through with the promised reward.
Seriously, even after that message?
Yep. Daniel is clothed in purple, the gold chain is put around his neck, and he's proclaimed the third highest ruler. The king kept his word, formally at least, even as his kingdom was metaphorically collapsing around him.
Strange formality in the face of doom. Daniel gets the rewards he initially turned down.
But the real kicker, the part that underscores the entire chapter, is the timing.
Right. Daniel gives the interpretation, gets his rewards, and then
The text says, that very night,
that night.
Belshazzar, the king of the Babylonians, was slain.
Wow. Just like that. No delay, no chance to appeal, no time to strategize. The judgment Daniel announced was executed instantly.
While the purple robes were probably still settling on Daniel's shoulders, the king was dead.
And the second part of the interpretation, the kingdom being divided.
That happens immediately, too. Fulfilling the Perez part, the text just states, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. Simple as that. The transfer of power, the end of Belshazzar's reign, and that phase of the Babylonian Empire, it all happened literally overnight, within hours. The whole sequence is just breathtakingly fast, isn't it? From the height of the feast and the blasphemy, to the writing, the interpretation, and the immediate final consequence, all in one evening.
It really drives home how quickly things can change, especially when, as Daniel pointed out, clear warnings are ignored.
Yeah, the whole arc is incredibly tight. The prideful party, the terrifying sign, the failure of human wisdom, Daniel's arrival and his stark message linking actions to fate, and boom, instant fulfillment.
The takeaways from the text seem pretty clear then.
Definitely. The consequences of ignoring history, of not learning from past mistakes, that powerful idea of being weighed and found wanting, and just the sheer speed at which reality can assert itself when fundamental truths are defied.
So as you reflect on this account, what really jumps out at you? Is it that shocking speed of the consequence? Or that image of the scales being measured and found lacking? Perhaps it's how pride seemed to blind Belshazzar to the obvious danger signals.
And it does leave us with a final thought, a question really, that arises directly from the source material itself, particularly that immediate fulfillment. Considering how swiftly judgment followed the interpretation of the writing on the wall for Belshazzar, are there maybe writings on the wall in our own lives, or perhaps in our communities, clear warnings that we might be misinterpreting, or maybe even consciously ignoring, before it's suddenly too late?